Attention all passengers for Flight 1370. It looks like the plane is going to be delayed a little bit longer. The airline has lost the pilot's luggage. Isn't it time you got your pilot's license? Call Ocala Aviation today. 352-861-7484. That's 352-861-7484. Hey, you've earned it. Call today.
Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
When you grow up on Long Island, as I did, you're only 10 miles from Brooklyn, and yet you can tell the kids from Brooklyn because they had a certain accent. But you know they had more than one accent in Brooklyn? There was the Brooklyn accent.
Oh.
And then there was the Jewish Brooklyn accent. It was two different things. And the best way the best example would be Barbra Streisand. You said, oh, you want to know what a Jewish Brooklyn accent is? Just listen to how Barbra Streisand speaks. And then you would get to the point, well, how could somebody who speaks like that sing so beautifully? I don't know how, but it is a miracle. And I don't think anybody disagrees with the fact that she has one of the most beautiful voices ever. And just a delight to watch in so many of the movies that she made, and I just loved that Jewish Brooklyn accent that she had in the movies. It added to her personality. Yes, it was just so beautiful, and gosh, it made her so endeared to all of us. And gosh, wouldn't it be nice to? She was on Jimmy Fallon the other night. I don't know what night because I watched it on YouTube, but she took he gave her the desk seat.
Oh.
He was in such awe of her. He said, "You know what? You don't deserve in the guest seat. You deserve to be the host." And so she sat in that seat and still looked really pretty. I haven't seen her in any recent things, but there she was, looking as beautiful as ever. Neal Gabler must be a fan also. He has written a whole book about her, and it's just a delight to read as much as she is to listen to and to watch. Neal has, quite a respectable resume himself. He's an historian, a journalist, a film critic, the recipient of the Los Angeles Times Book Prize, the recipient of the Nonfiction Book of the Year Award for Winchell by Time Magazine. He's a former host of the PBS show called Sneak Previews, and he's got a bunch of books. The one we're talking about, though, is called Barbra Streisand, Redefining Beauty, Femininity, and Power. I sure hope she likes this. Every time once in a while you hear about a book written by a celebrity, and the celebrity says, I don't like the book. I hope she likes this one. Neal Gabler, good morning, sir. How, again, are you? Now
good morning.
Talking on the air, yeah. Where are you? Where are you right now?
I live in Amagansett, New York, which is all the way near the tip of Long Island. If you're a Long Islander, you will know that Montauk is the very tip, easternmost point of Long Island, and we are the next contiguous village. It's part of the Hamptons.
Is that right?
Wow.
So I live in the Hamptons, but I live here, I always hasten to add, I live here full-time like the poor people, rather than only during the summer like the rich people.
Does the Long Island Railroad go all the way out that way? I never know.
It does. It goes all the way to Montauk.
Wow. How long of a ride is that from Manhattan? Is that a 2-hour ride now?
That is almost, over 2 hours. It's
2
about,
hours.
it is a Long Island. People hear Long Island and they think it's New York, but it's about 2.5 hours from the tip of Long Island to New York City.
Yeah. If you fall asleep, you could end up there. If you're going home from when you have to get off.
You could end up in worse places. Let me just put it that way.
Well, I am so delighted with this topic. I love Barbra Streisand, and I'm guessing you do too.
I do. Although I'll tell you, Larry, when I started this project, I started it because I felt she was a very important figure in American popular culture. One of those handful of people who redefined not only her art, but also helped define American popular culture. So I didn't approach her as like an adoring fan. I liked her singing, but I had what I would call a cold admiration. I liked her acting better than I liked her singing, but in the process of writing the book, I heard her so much that my cold admiration turned much, much warmer, and is, in fact, now hot admiration.
Is that
again,
right?
The impulse for the book was not so much that I was gaga over Streisand, although now I'm much more gaga, as that I felt she is really a central figure in American popular culture.
Well, in a way, that would make you the perfect person to write this book, knowing that, because you're not going into it gushing, you're going into it looking at it as a historian.
You're exactly right, and I think I like to think I brought some objectivity to it. But the fact of the matter is, when you get inside the life, let's forget the work for a moment, although the work is obviously the reason we talk about here. But when you get inside the life, it's very hard not to be attracted to her, because when you see the obstacles that this woman overcame when she was very young and at probably the most impressionable and sensitive age. I mean, she makes it when she's just a kid, basically, a teenager. And the abuse that was heaped upon her by her own mother when she, as a child, said that she had the aspirations to become a movie star. And in point of fact, she never really aspired to become a singer. She always wanted to be a movie star. She understood that real celebrity, real stardom was Hollywood stardom, not singing stardom. And singing came too easily for her. But when she professed this to her mother said, no, you're too ugly to be a movie star. Later, her father died when she was only 15 months old, and her mother married a man with the inappropriate name of Kind, Lewis Kind. He couldn't have been more unkind. They had a daughter together, whom some of your listeners may remember as Rosalind Kind, who was also a singer. And he would say of his own daughter, beauty, and then he'd point to Barbra and say the beast. So this is the kind of thing that this young girl had to address and had to overcome. And you can't help, when you get inside this life, of feeling this enormous sympathy for her. And you certainly understand, I know there are some detractors who think she's a monster and a diva and all this stuff, but let me tell you, if she's a monster and a diva, she's entitled.
or I like that. I like that. So when you're looking at her young life, it helps explain a lot of what she went through. Do you think the life she went through, the personal life, contributed to her interpretation of her acting roles? Because I think
absolutely.
I think I see that, but I don't know enough about this subject. But does that happen? Does that cross over from in an actor or an actress to have their personal life actually contribute to, their interpretation of the role that they have in black and white on a piece of paper?
I think you're absolutely right. And I would go farther than that. I would say that the tribulations that she endured when she was young become, in a way, not only the through line of her entire career, but also the basis of our attachment as an audience toward her. When you listen to her music, now you reference the films, and I'll get to that in a moment, but when you listen to her music, how many of her songs are about loneliness, are about pain, are about heartbreak, and also about defiance. Don't rain on my parade. The defiance that you need to endure the heartbreak. Yeah. And then when you listen to her sing, there is a through line through most of her music, which is that through line. Then you look at her films, and almost every single one of her films is about a woman who has to overcome all of these odds, her looks, the humiliation she has to endure, the fact that she's got to try and win over a man using other kind of strategies than the typical Hollywood strategy, which is, look at me, I'm beautiful. Well, Barbra Streisand couldn't come on screen and say, look at me, I'm beautiful. And it's one of the reasons why, just to take your point a little bit further, Larry, is you notice in almost every single Barbra Streisand film, there are a couple of exceptions, she doesn't get the man at the end of the movie. There is heartbreak at the end of the film. If you think of The Way We Were, or Yentl, or Funny Girl, three of her most famous movies, she doesn't land the guy. She's alone at the end of the movie.
I never noticed that before. But you know what I would say? Gosh, and I am telling you this as honestly as I can. As a young guy looking at Barbra Streisand when she was in those movies, I thought she was beautiful. I didn't see her as unattractive at all. I really didn't. And I'm not just saying that.
Well, now...
I don't know.
Now you get to the subtitle of my book, which is Redefining Beauty, Femininity, and Power, because I think she did to the general public exactly what she did to you. Because she comes on screen, and you might say at first blush, boy, there's never been anybody on screen as a major star who looks like this. But in the course of her film, of a single film, look at the course of Funny Girl, and certainly in the course of her career, she manages somehow to mesmerize us and change our perceptions of beauty. It was the critic Pauline Kael, New Yorker critic Pauline Kael, who said of her, and I think this is one of the great lines about her, she said that Barbra Streisand taught us that talent is beauty. And there is a way in which our attraction to what she kind of pervade on screen, made her beautiful, even physically beautiful.
And I wonder how much of my attraction was because of her voice, her singing voice. Well, even her speaking voice. There was something attractive about her in my young world. When I was just looking at her.
She was different.
She was.
I'm sorry, Robin. I didn't mean to cut you off.
She's totally real though, because when she does take on those roles, when she does sing about songs, I mean, you see this vulnerability in her, but she also embraces the family in her films. I mean, she's either a mom where the child is with her, or she's loving her mom, like in Funny Girl, and embracing the aunts in the family way. And it's just really amazing how she conveys everything in a most real way.
Authenticity. I think you're absolutely right. We see a lot of stars, and they can be great stars, but they don't always feel authentic. But with Barbra Streisand, you really feel her authenticity. The music critic Gene Lees once said of Frank Sinatra that he was the Montgomery Clift of singers, and by that I think he meant that he was like a method actor. You felt when you listen to Sinatra that he's feeling everything he's singing, and I think that is also true of Barbra Streisand, and then some. In some ways, she's the Marlon Brando of singers, because you feel every emotion when she sings them. And in part, I think you feel them, as I said earlier, because she actually experienced them. She wasn't just a pretty girl who was plucked, from anonymity and became a movie star and a singing star. She was a girl who fought for her stardom against all the odds, and you feel that fight when you hear her sing or when you watch her on screen.
And her co-actors in each of the movies, I mean, she's run the gamut from Walter Matthau to Robert Redford, and that's huge.
Yeah, well, Walter Matthau, I tell a story in the book. Walter Matthau detested her. Because Walter Matthau had been a journeyman actor, he felt that he paid his dues, and then here comes this young whippersnapper. She's 26 years old when they make Hello, Dolly. And he feels that she's got too much power, and she feels too entitled, and of course everyone is salaaming before her because she is the star of the moment, and he just makes her life as miserable as he can possibly make it when they're making that picture together. And at one point he goes to the head of the studio, 20th Century Fox, Richard Zanuck, and he complains. He complains about Barbra Streisand. He says, I just can't work with her. And Zanuck has one of the great lines for me. He said, the movie's not titled Hello, Walter.
I love that.
And
that's funny.
But she made him look really good, though, in that movie, her character.
She makes everybody look good. He resented her perfectionism, but the fact of the matter is, Barbra Streisand is a consummate professional and perfectionist. Now, it may drive some people crazy, and there are a lot of people who felt, well, this is her diva behavior. Everything has to be exactly right. But as Streisand herself had said, and this gets us into the whole feminism aspect of Barbra Streisand, she said, when a man is a perfectionist, nobody says anything about it. But when a woman tries to be a perfectionist, she's difficult, and she's a diva, and she's the B word, and all of that stuff. And of course, Barbra Streisand took all of that abuse, took all of that heat, and she said openly, it's unfair.
Do you know, I remember a story from Billy Joel. He was a songwriter, wanting to be a successful songwriter, and somehow Barbra Streisand heard the song New York State of Mind and recorded it. And that was kind of what really got him on the map. Not completely. I mean, he still had to have some hits of his own. But once she did New York State of Mind, I guess people started noticing him as a songwriter. Did you ever hear that story?
I have heard that story. And yeah, I mean, if Barbra Streisand sang your song, I mean, it was a career maker.
Yeah.
Because she had that kind of power. Not only in the music world generally, but also I think it's important again on this female, aspect. There had never been a singer who had the popularity of Barbra Streisand when a female singer when she released her first album. I mean, she had the first gold album for a female singer in years, and for her first album, she won the Grammy for Album of the Year, as she did the following year as well. So she also kind of not only asserted her own career, but she also blazed a path for female vocalists who were generally kind of disregarded. In fact, she herself was disregarded. I mean, it took her, and I tell this story in the book, it was a real feat for her to land a recording contract with Columbia Records.
My goodness, really?
But, they didn't want her. They did not want her. They didn't think she had it.
What?
Boy, you talk about
that is crazy.
A miscalculation.
Yeah.
And in order to get that, what she did was, and this also I think speaks to who Barbra Streisand is, she took less money so that she could have complete control, as like a 20-year-old girl, complete control over the production of that album. But that's who she is.
Wow. You can hear her influence in Celine Dion, and I think even Celine Dion has said that she was greatly influenced by Barbra Streisand. And while they're separate voices, two different distinct voices, but you can hear that maybe her early influences were Barbra Streisand. You can hear that.
And not only, Mariah Carey, I think Lady Gaga. It's hard,
Lady Gaga.
I think, to be a female vocalist without in some way, hearkening back to Barbra Streisand, because she kind of set the bar very high, and she did all sorts of things vocally. I mean, you were talking earlier about her accent, and she sings in that accent too. That's one of the interesting things. There's a real musicality about the sort of Yiddishisms in that Brooklyn accent that she actually sings with. And that becomes part of her whole persona, and it also becomes something that I think other singers kind of latch onto and even pick up. I talk in the book about the mechanics of Barbra Streisand's singing, because you know she's great when you listen to her, but you don't know why she's great mechanically. And there are all sorts of things that she did that very few singers before her did to make the sounds sound different. And I go into them in the book, but basically it comes down to this, that she took sounds that are ordinarily ugly. There's actually a name for these sounds. They're called schwa.
Really?
And they're kind of ugly sounds. And singers usually don't like to sing them because they sound ugly coming out of the mouth. But Barbra Streisand had the ability to take schwa sounds, a sound like amazing, in the it's not a beautiful sound. The O in gallop, it's not a beautiful sound. And she had a way of taking those sounds and bringing them up into her soft palate and making those sounds sound good by changing them and changing the shape of her mouth. And what does it come down to? It comes down to Barbra Streisand in almost every aspect of her life, including her singing, took the ugly and made it beautiful.
The one thing that we don't always recognize in a great singer, and Barbra Streisand is the best example, especially since we're talking about her, is that the voice is, if you're a skillful singer, I have to put in that little footnote, is a musical instrument. It's we always admire great instrumentalists, but we forget that a singer is using a God-given instrument. And in her case, there's no question about it.
You are right, and also here's another thing we don't often recognize about vocalists is they're also athletes. Because when you listen to as much of Barbra Streisand as I listen to, and you listen to her breathing, and you listen to how she sometimes surges through a song, meet me at the market in Old Peking, an old Cole Porter song, which is on her very first album. If you listen to that song and the breath control it takes, it's a very fast song, and there's almost no breathing in that song. And you say to yourself, "Holy cow, this is like a swimmer, at a meet that she can actually sustain that." Man, it's you're really, it's Michael Phelps, except as a singer.
Oh, that's great. You are obviously a fan. If you didn't start out as one, you definitely are now. Let me take a little break. We've got a weather break, and then we've got about 5 minutes left on the other side of the break to talk about this. The book is called Barbra Streisand. I always wanted to ask about the spelling of her name, too, so we'll do that on the other side. Neal Gabler is our guest. We'll be right back with Neal after this.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident on this Wednesday. Sunshine mixing with clouds with a thunderstorm around, but mainly dry near the coast. The high 91 to 95. It'll be partly cloudy Wednesday night, low 74 to 78. Thursday and Friday will be hot with sunshine and some clouds and a thunderstorm around each afternoon, although mainly dry along the coast each day. High both days between 91 and 95. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
You can't put it off any longer. It's time to replace your home's AC system.
The answer is ACEsolvesItAll.com and an exceptionally efficient AC system. Let the pros at A show you how you can save on energy monthly and give your family added comfort. The great thing is that ACEsolvesItAll.com is on call 7 to 7, 7 days a week at no extra charge.
For a limited time, mention WOCA and get a special discount.
Call 877-765-4ACE or ACEsolvesItAll.com.
All right, 25 minutes after 9 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Beautiful Wednesday morning, and we are talking about Barbra Streisand. Neal Gabler wrote the book titled simply Barbra Streisand, the subtitle Redefining Beauty, Femininity, and Power. And Neal is on the far tip of Long Island, just anxious to go back into the ocean today, right?
That's right.
I'll be working, unfortunately. When you live in a vacation community, the funny thing is you never vacation.
That's kind of funny. Do you get into the city much?
Not much, no. I now with all of the technologies, I do almost all of my writing here. I spend more time in California than I do in New York City.
Oh, is that right?
Because I have more occasion to go out there for my work.
So tell me about the spelling of her first name, Barbra. How did that happen?
Well, okay. Interesting story. She was born with Barbra spelled the way that almost every Barbara spells Barbara. But after she made her very first appearance, and she made her first appearance at a talent show. Again, as I said earlier, she never wanted to be a singer. She always wanted to be a movie star. But she did have these great singing chops. She had them from the time she was a little girl. And friends convinced her, look, the way you're going to succeed, you're not, with that face, you're not going to become a Hollywood star overnight.
My goodness, they really gave her a bad complex. They gave her a complex.
I'll tell you, they did give her a bad complex. And I'll tell you, it was worse when she met the producers who were actually going to be hiring her. They were far crueler. So she decided to enter a talent contest where she would be singing at a club in Greenwich Village. And she appeared there. It's kind of the story of her life, actually. She was preceded in this talent contest by the niece of the jazz xylophonist Lionel Hampton, a beautiful blues singer by the name of Dawn Hampton. And, of course, Barbra Streisand comes up there and wins the contest. And afterwards, she goes out to a little diner with two of her friends, and someone who had seen her at this contest where she just blew people away. First time she ever performed publicly, and just blew people away. Someone came up and asked for her autograph. And she signed it B-A-R-B-R-A. And her friends looked at her, and she said, from now on, I'm going to be Barbra, B-A-R-B-R-A.
Is that right? Just decided to do it.
She decided to do it because she said, I'm different, and this is different, and I'm going to be different.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah. Then she renamed herself in honor of her difference.
Well, in everything she does, she really does exude elegance, whether it's acting or singing, directing, producing. I mean, she has a certain insight that she's able to bring out whatever it is the story calls for at the moment.
But what's surprising is, she didn't start out that way. When she started out, she was known as kooky. She dressed in this really kind of kooky, antique clothing. The things didn't match. And she actually sort of created a style in New York because of the way she dressed. But it's over time, as she kind of ascended, that she changed her style and became a huge tastemaker in the high fashion world. She was in Vogue magazine and whatever. And all of that, I think, is part of that process that I discussed earlier, where here was this ugly duckling who became a swan. And in that process of becoming a swan, the people who were attracted to her because she was an ugly duckling kind of appreciated this. In some ways, you could say that Barbra Streisand succeeded for her fans as well as for herself.
See, I don't see her as an ugly duckling. I guess that's what she's living with now, and believing in. But I don't know. To me, I'm looking at a young picture right now. I just went online to look at some of her younger pictures, and she just never looked ugly to me. I don't know what it was.
Even the cover photo for my book, shows her, I think, with a real elegance.
It's a beautiful picture on the book.
Sort of an exotic beauty, but again, not the traditional American, little, cupcake blonde, but a different kind of beauty that, again, as I said earlier, goes on to redefine how we think of beauty today.
We are at the end of the interview, and I just want to thank you, Neal, for being on the air with us. The book is called Barbra Streisand, simple as that. Neal spells his last name Gabler if you're looking him up. Do you have a website, Neal?
I do not, but you can find, I do have an author's page on goodreads.com, and you can find me there and ask me questions or contact me if you like.
Well, definitely you are welcome back anytime. That was so great. I know you do a lot of good books, so I can't wait to hear about the others that you write. Thank you, Neal. I'm going to end with about 10 seconds of Barbra Streisand. Thank you, Neal. We'll be right back.
That's the way to end. Thank you so much.
Fox News Radio, I'm Lillian Wu. 3 of the 5 officers killed in Dallas last week laid to rest today.
Sergeant Mike Smith, Senior Corporal Lauren Aarons, and Dart Officer Brent Thompson. Thompson's funeral will be a private ceremony, but a public memorial for him will also be held. Other services are set for this weekend.
Fox Radio's Gernal Scott. The White House taking steps to try and address the issue of police bias in some communities with some meetings today. Donald Trump closing in on announcing a running mate.
Among them, Governor Mike Pence from Indiana, who he campaigned with yesterday in the Hoosier State, Newt Gingrich, the former House Speaker, Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey, who's been helping out Trump, along with Jeff Sessions of Alabama, one of his first endorsers.
Blake Berman with the Fox Business Network, and a woman from Peru caught trying to smuggle more than $1 million in counterfeit $100 bills through Boston's Logan International Airport. They were hidden in yarn spindles.